Welcome back to Expert Instruction, the Teach by Design podcast, where we dive deeper into the research surrounding student behavior by talking with the people implementing these practices, where they work, and with the students they support. I'm Megan Cave.
I'm Danielle Triplett.
Well, Danielle, we are doing a very special thing.
Yes, we are.
And this is the first of our very special episodes where we are collaborating. Our little Expert Instruction podcast is collaborating with the Crisis Prevention Workgroup from the Center to bring you a series of podcast episodes related to crisis prevention. And so joining us in this very special series is our very new friend, Janelle Hughes from the Crisis Prevention Workgroup.
Welcome, Janelle.
Thank you so much, Danielle and Megan. I'm so excited.
Oh my God, so are we.
Me too. I've been looking forward to it all week.
This is the first of 4 opportunities for us to just get together, talk, and learn from our partners in the field. And this entire engagement series that we've been hosting as a part of our work group is focused on really linking PBIS with crisis prevention, protection, and mitigation. And I think belonging is the foundation of it all. And so we wanted to really kick off this series with that focus on belonging as a crisis prevention tool. And I know you all have spoken before with our partners in Pennsylvania, and we really wanted to take an opportunity to highlight the great work that they're doing.
Oh, such good work.
We love doing that.
We do. We love that so much. So joining us today in this conversation, we have 3 guests. The first one I want to talk to you about is Dr. Nikole Holland-Sims. She's an educational leader, consultant, speaker. She's known for her expertise in equitable practices, systems, transformation, and leadership coaching. In her work, Nikole guides schools and organizations to build sustainable, more human-centered practices. She's also the lead author of a book that's called Creating Equitable Practices in PBIS, which we have a copy of in our office, and it is excellent. Joining her also with us today is Kelly Perales. She is the co-executive director of the Midwest PBIS Network and an implementer partner with the Center on PBIS. In her work, Kelly provides professional development and technical assistance for state and local leaders on the implementation and scaling up of PBIS. Kelly has also led local, regional, and state level implementers in the Interconnected Systems Framework, which we've talked about here on this podcast before. That framework focuses on the ways to really blend mental health and education systems. Last, but certainly not least, we have Becky Millspaugh. She's a project consultant for the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit and a school improvement facilitator for Montgomery County Schools in Pennsylvania. In the past, Becky has been a member of the Pennsylvania PBS Network state leadership team, where she provided support for MTSS system development, implementation, and evaluation across both Delaware and Montgomery counties. Becky currently provides professional learning and data analysis strategies for complex mental health support planning for teams across the Commonwealth. We're so glad to have all of them here today.
Kelly, Becky, and Nikole, they were just such perfect options for us to consider as we thought about having this conversation, because they bring varied perspectives. But I think they also illustrate the importance of that integration. Even though they all do different things in their states, they're working together already, and that's the starting point. Is that relationship building. So
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Oh, yeah, same. At the end of everything, it was just so obvious that all of you all have worked together in the past before. The conversation is so simple with all of these women. We've talked to Nikole, Dr. Nikole Holland-Sims, a couple of times before, specifically related to belonging, but something that has come up in those episodes, but also in this one, are all the ways that our school functions as a unit, but also within a larger system of community inside and outside of the walls. And that in order for the school to function the way that we want it to, we have to make sure that everyone feels like they're a part of it, that they contribute something valuable to it, and that's not something that I can do for Danielle, let's say. That's something that I can create the space, and Danielle can find where she fits. And what I loved about our conversation are the ways that they talk to us about how PBIS can support that effort in the building too.
Yes, such a good point. I really loved one thing that stuck with me was at the end. So listen in for this, but that kind of idea of also leading with empathy,
Yes.
right? Like that a lot of times as educators, when it comes to behaviors or crises, we think of, okay, we've got to react, we've got to do something. And sometimes that action is empathy, is really thinking of the feelings and considering that and creating a space for students to share that with us. So really loved that point there.
I agree. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me. And I think also, as you mentioned, Megan, just that when we talk about belonging, it's not just about students, it's about staff, it's about the community,
Yes.
and not just families, but also partners within the
Yeah.
community as well. So, oh gosh, I just can't wait to sit down with this and take tons of notes to share out with everyone.
Grab your pencils, grab your paper,
It's
sit
great.
down with something warm to drink or an
Yes.
umbrella, whatever,
Wherever you
whatever
are.
tickles your fancy.
Yes.
And take a listen in to our friends, Dr. Nicole Holland-Sims, Kelly Perales, and Becky Melswaw.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much for being here, everybody. So you all are kicking off our collaboration series around crisis prevention. Specifically today, we wanted to talk about how belonging can kind of serve as a crisis prevention strategy. Janelle, do you want to give us a lead in for our group?
Sure. Thank you all so much again for joining us. We are so excited to have this conversation about such an important topic. When we talk about school safety, the conversation often focuses on what to do during a crisis. And we want to have an extended version of that conversation today and really look at belonging as a foundational prevention strategy and how that connects to the systems that schools already have in place, including PBIS. So we're so excited to hear your perspectives from the state of Pennsylvania. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. How does creating a strong sense of belonging in schools act as a prevention strategy for crises rather than simply a response after something goes wrong?
Yeah, so I'm going to kick this off. Excited to be a part of this conversation as well. When I think about belonging as a concept, it already feels preventative in nature. And what I mean by that is the goal is to create systems and structures that allow for students, adults, families, whatever group we're discussing, to feel like they have a connection, that they have a place, and that they have agency. And what I mean by that is it's safe to be able to speak what you need and ask for what you need and expect what you should receive. So when I think of the definition of belonging, there's a lot of definitions out there. There's one that I really lean into, and that's from Floyd Cobb and John Cronapple. And they talk about four indicators of belonging, such as appreciation, validation, fair treatment, and being acknowledged and valued. And so I think all four of them really lend themselves to creating those atmospheres where students can feel like I belong here, I have a connection here. We know that a lot of the students that have been engaged in crisis related events, unfortunately, have probably experienced some form of social isolation. And because of that social isolation, what can we do as a system to prevent that from being a real thing? And then also make sure that students, families, et cetera, all feel like they have a piece of this community in the school building. So for me, I think belonging has to be the prevention strategy in order for us to see a reduction in the crisis events that unfortunately we've experienced.
I think that, one of the things that I want to connect to is one of the last points you were making, which is that idea of family, school, community partnerships, because we're all in this together. And so, yes, it's important that within schools, we foster that sense of belonging for all students and also making those connections with families and caregivers with things like bidirectional communication and finding authentic ways to partner with families so that everyone can be in the know and be part of the planning and the processes from prevention through some sort of a response to a crisis or an intervention. So I really appreciated all you shared there, but that last piece, I just wanted to make that connection to.
The thing that Danielle and I hear often from a lot of the guests that we talk about are all of these different partnerships that happen related to school, because school, it serves an academic purpose. Obviously, there's curriculum and learning that has to take place, but there's so many social components to it. We've talked to a number of people who have talked about social workers
Yep.
and keeping them as part of the team. We've talked to community members, a Starbucks team lead who participated in the recognition system. There's all kinds of things that end up ultimately creating this larger school-wide community, this large web of people that are involved in what's happening inside the building. And I can only imagine that if a student did not feel like they were a part of that, what that would mean for them, if they felt excluded from that, because I can also really understand what it means to actively feel like you are a part of that, you know? Becky, what were you going to share?
Actually, what I was going to share is I've recently experienced this. We're right now in the throes of doing our fidelity walkthroughs and our checklists across the state of Pennsylvania. And what I'm starting to see now more than ever is people stating belongingness is important. That people have posted. I walked into a classroom that on the outside of the door, it said, "This class is better with you in it."
Aw.
And just having those words there and available and open. I'm also working in a school right now where they say the languages that they can speak, and many of our teachers can speak multiple languages. I think that sense of belongingness has to not only be part of who you are personally and part of your practice and your policies, but it also has to be out there. It has to be known. And sometimes we think, and a lot of my teams will say, well, of course they feel like they belong here. Hmm, but do they? And so I think really, really having that strong sense of belonging starts with how you're actually sharing whether it is a value for you.
Nikole, what Becky was sharing just then really reminded me of our conversation that we had with you,
Yes.
where you can't actually be the person to tell someone that they belong. Do you want to say, do you want to
Yes.
say more about that?
Yeah, that and I'm sitting here and my heart's just like, oh, I'm so excited.
We could see it in your eyes,
It-
Nicole.
in real time it's happening, and Becky and I have worked for a long time together, and so just to know that it's translating into real work is important. But what I had shared with Megan and Danielle earlier is that it is not our job to tell someone that they belong. As a matter of fact, we're out of order if we tell someone that they belong, because that's a very internal and personal feeling. It's subjective in nature. And so, what our role is to do exactly what Becky just said, put it out there and create the conditions for belonging to be accessible. Because again, I can't tell Megan she belongs. I can't tell Kelly she belongs. Those things just have to be something that I can feel when I come into a building or into a space. And I love what Kelly said about families. They also should feel that as well when they come into our building. So I'm so excited. This is perfect.
Yes.
No, the real time of it all, it's happening. So when we talk about a feeling, I think we all can know when we felt like we belonged in a place or when we felt like we didn't belong. Working where we work, we also are very aware of the difference between a qualitative piece of data and a quantitative one. So if you could just help us out, you guys, and maybe give us some ways that we might be able to see, what are some early ways that we might be able to experience that a student might not feel like they belong in a place, and how can a PBIS team serve to address what they see?
Sure. I'll kick this one off. I mean, certainly there could be many signs that a student is not feeling a sense of belonging, and it might be not showing up at all. So, attendance could be an indicator, perhaps being withdrawn or not being involved in activities. There are lots of extracurricular things that happen inside schools, and sometimes there are youth who are not participating in any of those. It could be grades. whether that's not ever performing at a level that is desired or grades slipping. And certainly it could be acting out behavior. And then, of course, we know um, there are students who are suffering in silence, which is when you look at PBIS and how it can be supportive, certainly there is all of the preventative aspects, when done well, its very nature is to create safe, predictable, consistent, nurturing environments where staff and students feel like they belong. And we have research and data to back that up. And there are examples, adults ensuring that, all of their students have an adult they trust in school, that they have one other peer to call a friend, that they could encourage kids to um, express themselves through various activities with their time and talents. But then there are other things like looking at that data or utilizing a universal screening system, which can further help uncover potential risk. And that could also get us at, students maybe even self reporting that they're feeling like they don't belong. And I wonder, Becky, maybe if you want to talk about the PAYS data, and we're not supposed to use acronyms, so I'll let you talk about what that is and how it's
I
used.
know. I was like, what is PAYS?
Tell us what it is.
No money exchanged hands.
Man.
Called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. And it is a survey that's taken every 2 years. And districts across the state of Pennsylvania can opt in. And when they opt in, nowadays, it used to be that the school district got that information, and none of us who were providing some of the support were aware of what the data had. And now they have a county level aggregation. So the beautiful thing about this Pennsylvania Youth Survey is it gets larger and larger with participation every year. And so therefore we can now start to look at some of the patterns. And it used to be that it was very much drug and alcohol related and what was the use, and Pennsylvania was trying to determine whether there was risk, right, in students using these substances. But now it has expanded specifically after the pandemic to include many more school climate, social emotional indicators that help schools and districts actually look at whether or not their system of PBIS and any other supports that they have in their space are actually impacting the students and in what way. I just recently talked to a school district director, and she said she uses the county level data to see to what extent her students are showing risk so that she can even look at it as a peer to peer. So we're starting to see information that's coming directly from the students, and it's in grades 6 through 12. And again, the districts have to opt into it, but the information's becoming more and more rich because now we can look at what's happening at the county level, what's happening at the state level in regards to these same questions, and I am seeing a lot more teams start to use that across the board.
Becky, if I'm not mistaken, this might not have been the 2025 version, but I think the state is also leaning towards providing this at fourth grade. Just to get an even younger sample. And I don't know that that happened with this most recent one, but I do know that that's in the works. So we'll be able to have even richer data that spans multiple grade bands.
Yeah, we always, whenever we have these questions, like if a student is XYZ, then what do you do? And Danielle is always great to be like, well, maybe.
Ask the kids, right? Has anyone asked them for their ideas, for their
Yeah.
point of view, their lived experience, and what they think might help?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I
So,
think that's an important piece of information. Just that some of my teams have been really doing a lot more of that. We've been doing a lot of that talk about how do we integrate what we do for academic supports and for behavioral supports
Yeah.
because we're talking about a whole child here, right? Especially when we're trying to be preventative. So a lot of folks are using that, hey, let's interview students. Let's do some observations in the space. One of the things I also reckon, I go across the state because I'm from a very large family. So I have some of my nieces and nephews are still in school over in the western side of Pennsylvania. And I went to a musical because it is musical season right now.
Yes,
oh, yeah.
I went to a musical, and in the bathroom stall, there was a QR code that if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling down, if you feel like you need some help, and it was actually a Google form that went to the counselors. And I often worry about those internalizers. Like a lot of times, Kelly, you were talking about those externalizing behaviors, they pretty much tell us that there's a risk. I worry very much for our internalizers. And I thought, wow, how about taking that barrier away? If I'm very shy, I may not fill out that school climate survey, but if I have that right in front of me, right? The chances of me using it. And I talked with one of the counselors, and she said they have had such an increase of self-identification in order to reduce those number. And what she saw was a reduction in risk assessment. So what happened was they were able to get to these students ahead of time
Wow.
before going to a full risk assessment. So I think we're also starting to see some promising practices as well.
Becky, I love that example. First off, I was at a musical at the high school that my daughter will go to. She's in middle school now. So we were there seeing Mamma Mia last night. Super fun. But similarly, I was noticing as I was walking around how much signage they had and language they were using. That was really intentionally positive, talking about wellness. But I'm thinking with that, I mean, for kids that, we know, and I know when I was a teacher, if they don't have a lot of spaces to go, right? Sometimes it's like there's not just a safe place. And so sometimes kids do use the restroom as like, I can go here, I can be alone, I can be safe. So it makes sense, like have that there for them if you're feeling lost, QR code, like so accessible. So thank you for sharing that. So let's take it back. We've got lots of listeners out there, both from probably Pennsylvania, but a national audience. So for our schools listening to the podcast, thinking about this, how can they leverage some of their systems in PBIS to really strengthen belonging and ultimately reduce the likelihood of them being in crisis? Can you give us a couple practical strategies that our listeners could take away from this?
When I think about this and I think about what Nikole said earlier, I think of us creating what we call enabling contexts, right? So how do we invite people in? How do we expand the roles within PBIS? And what I mean by that is we were just talking about student voice, right?
Yeah.
How do we get it from consultation to collaboration?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. One high school actually had, I know this doesn't happen in any other high school. There was a high level of stress, especially as we're going into spring. And the team came together with the PBIS core team members who were managing that student leadership team. And they said, we need to do something different here. The fact that they had agency to say that really speaks a lot, right? Of wanting to improve their school. And they said, we need to have some days. We need some days where we can actually just go over some skills and how we can manage our stress. So they came up with this idea of SEL, social emotional learning days. And anybody in their discipline, so if it was the science teacher, they had a ton of activities that the science teacher could use during advisory that they just did during that day. And so the teachers had the opportunity to choose. And you see, what happened was we expanded the reach of PBIS, not just to be the core team, but now everyone has the ability to be part of that discussion. There's an agency to choose what the teacher wanted to do that was SEL focused, and it was also very much in alignment with their discipline. So what I mean by expanding the role is expanding the role so we're not just having one core team looking at this data and trying to figure out how they're going to, in Nikole's words, make everything belonging, right? It's hard to belong if you're not part of it. Another example is when we had a team tier 2. Tier 2 to me is very much an underdeveloped tier when it comes to crisis prevention. And so what this one school did is they expanded the role again of a design team. So the design team had other people that would not normally be involved that were part of designing supports, and students were part of that. 4th grade students were part of the design team of some ideas that we can do to make sure that we are intervening early. And then we had the implementation team. So I think that when we start thinking about what can our PBIS systems do to strengthen belonging, well, if I'm part of it, I have an enabling context to belong to the school and to the groups that I'm part of.
I love that, Becky. And I think we always talk about creating those structured opportunities, for student voice and participation. And it's a way to kind of loop students into the conversation and into the process, but that also allows a bit of creativity and some relationship building as a part of that, and allowing them to participate in kind of the design process, but also to get their buy-in. I think that goes a long way just in that overall relationship building that's so critical to building that sense of belonging. I love that example.
I think too, and Janelle, on the same wavelength. And how do we tap into the wisdom that students have and what they can bring forward? So, something that I'm really leaning into now is trying to understand how AI bots, I know I'm going down a path, so just
Okay,
follow
we'll
me.
follow you. Hey.
Okay. How AI bots are sometimes replacing friends at school,
Mm.
connections at school, creating spaces of belonging at school. I'm getting that from my chat friend who is a bot who just tells me what I want to hear and makes me feel good because I may not have connection in my home building. And so when we think of radicalization and things that are leading to students acting out in behaviors that may lead to crisis in our schools, we have to be intentional and also forward thinking about how we can support students that may have that and need it and love it, but help them understand how to use that in a healthier way so that they don't fall prey to something that puts us all in a situation where we're trying to respond to a crisis. That's another practical, not practical, but it's a strategy that we can't overlook because that's the reality that our students are living in that would be very different than even 10 years ago for us as we're talking about this work.
For sure.
I think that's such an important part of this conversation. And, this generation, they're dealing with things that we didn't have to deal with, quite frankly, when we were students. And what you just brought up, Nicole, makes me think about some recent research that I read from the organization. They're called Peril. And they really look at polarization and, extreme behaviors among students. And I just wanted to share that, they noted that students who feel disconnected or marginalized, they're definitely more vulnerable to those online communities that can be harmful, including those extremist spaces. And what role can the school play in the prevention part of that as well? It's kind of like, there's another battle that we're fighting here. And just thinking about a recent parent association meeting that I attended for my children's school, and there was an entire conversation about cell phone use policies and AI and how the teachers can just see the difference over the years in how students connect with each other in the school setting. And they were kind of emphasizing we don't want the students to FaceTime each other when they go home. We don't want them, like, we want to create real opportunities for connection and less connecting in these online environments. So I just had to add that again because I think it's an element of the conversation that we didn't have to think about, five even, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I just wanted to address that.
Janelle, I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking too about the very first community of practice that this work group kicked off for the Center on PBIS, and it was Bill. Is it Braniff?
Yes, Bill. Oh gosh,
Yeah.
he was so awesome.
I mean, I learned so many new things, and again, I don't want to date any of us here, but maybe of similar generation, and it was a different experience. We have, and there's here in Pennsylvania, the, see something, say something, which is, how to report concerns or potential crises or bullying. And he was saying, hear something, help someone. I believe I just should have looked that up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And that really stuck with me. I think that that's a really important message when you think about helping others feel like they belong. How do we teach our young people how to lean in and just be there and listen and support one another. So that was all connecting for me right there.
That whole idea of empathy is what I'm hearing. That
Yeah.
that word is just popping into my head. One of the things I think makes a difference too is when we as adults actually are modeling that same behavior. And when I think about what PBIS systems can do to strengthen, and I think like what's practical,
Mhm.
why isn't our first step on a flow chart, especially for low level behaviors, an empathy statement?
Ooh, yes.
So I had one approved private school that actually did that. They were concerned because you can imagine in an approved private school, you would have many students of multiple needs, right? And they were concerned that sometimes our flow chart is so technical and what we're going to do in our response to an unexpected behavior that it becomes much more cognitive. Like, what are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing? Can you show me what you need to do right now? What they did instead was they literally said, lead with an empathy statement. They trained their staff on leading with an empathy statement. And their risk assessments and their major referrals in an approved private school reduced significantly. And they attributed it to that practice. And I keep thinking maybe that's a way that we can start to make some inroads here, right? Is to lead with that empathy statement.
I love that. We've talked before about building relationships and how central that is to this whole framework, and how for some of us that feels really simple. Like we just get how we can
Mhm.
work together to build a relationship together. And in other ways, maybe with specific people, it's more challenging. And I think that strategy you just talked about is one way to just kind of build that bridge quickly, just
Mhm.
to kind of, you see someone, you hear someone, like Kelly was saying, and you help them out in that moment.
Mhm.
I really like that as a strategy.
Yeah, sometimes helping is just asking, like, "How are you feeling?
Yeah.
Are you okay? What do you need right now?" Right? Like something like that instead of
Mhm.
going to this more structured, like, "Let's
Yeah, a more
solve this
technical flow
problem."
chart.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also felt like, this whole concept of helping someone versus say something, which, in hindsight is really focused on reporting, right? I saw
Yeah.
something and recorded it to
Mhm.
someone. But,
Mhm.
versus I see something and I'm going to take an action,
That's right.
to help that person in need. It's really it shifted my mindset around, what student involvement in all of this looks like, as well as adult involvement in all of this. And I think that kind of ties into what you're saying, Becky, is like leading with empathy, and yeah, I loved that, what Bill shared there,
Yeah.
Kelly.
Thanks for bringing it here to this conversation, too. Well, thank you, ladies, for this opener
Mhm.
to our series on crisis prevention. I think there's a lot here to talk about and explore further, but we appreciate you taking the time to at least give us this little bit of information that we can all take back to our schools. Thank you.